Well, good morning and welcome to the Biz News Midweek Catch-up. Today we're discussing ISIS in Mozambique and the South African threat of that. Well, as it's quite well known, the Mozambican liquefied natural gas project operated by Total has managed to attract the biggest foreign direct investment in Africa, with there's something like 20 international banks, including Standard Bank, investing $14.9 billion in the project. The country is hoping that it will play a key role in Mozambique's growth, but there's a problem. It's threatened by groups claiming links to ISIS. Well, today I've got two analysts. At the moment, we're just waiting for Leigh Elston from Mozambique. We've had a bit of a problem with her connection. She will hopefully join us soon. But I've also got Liesl Louw-Vaudran from the Institute for Security Studies. Let me put that up. And welcome, Liesl. I've got your bio there, but can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a senior researcher and I head the Southern Africa project at the ISS. And we have been tracking the situation in Mozambique since the end of 2017. It is tricky because of the lack of access in many ways to, northern Cabo Delgado province of Mozambique. But yeah, with colleagues who work on counterterrorism around the continent in places like the Sahel, in Somalia, we've been trying to get a broader picture of terrorism on the continent, actually.
Well, this morning you said you had a group that you've already started discussing it with. Well, can you tell us a little bit before we get to the security thing, exactly how big is this investment for Mozambique?
Yes, it's a huge gas investment. I mean, Leigh, I think, is the natural resources expert, but we know that definitely it's one of the biggest investments on the continent. And it was announced in 2016. And that is really when I think a lot of the issues started in terms of not only the insurgency, which is quite a complex phenomenon, and I think it would be good to go into the root causes that we have identified of, this insurgency in the northern Mozambique. But of course, and we've seen that in many places around the continent, when there is such a big announcement of investment, the stakes are high, the political issues come into play. Mozambique is a desperately poor country, and in many different ways, the state is very weak, and I think that's why also we've now seen the lack of capacity of Mozambique to actually deal with its problems. It's got this insurgency now exactly pretty much right there where the natural gas exploration is happening. But it also has still some armed threats by parts of the Renamo, which used to be the old, even during the South African apartheid era, fighting Frelimo in Mozambique. So it's quite a complex situation. And I think, there was a lot of hope by politicians and by Mozambicans themselves that they would benefit from the gas exploration. But the whole situation has now turned into a very violent conflict, and it's very dramatic. I think people really underestimate what is happening in northern Mozambique.
Have there been attacks on companies like Total who's involved there?
Not yet. That is the thing, is there has been good protection, and most of it is offshore, as you know. There haven't been direct attacks on some of these installations, as we might have seen, elsewhere on the continent. But the area is threatened. Some of the, Musimbo da Praia, which is the little harbour town north of Pemba, where a lot of this activity is taking place, has become completely lawless, as one report says, because the insurgents had completely taken over the town, attacked people, kidnapped people, burnt down government installations, etc. So, and some of the routes have now become insecure. So you have to use convoys. It really isn't safe for people to move around. Of course, if you have a big investment like that, you have a lot of other infrastructure, and there are lots of South African companies that might not be directly involved in the natural gas themselves, but of course, because of this big investment and the need for all kinds of secondary activities, there are many South African companies and others that are now involved there. In that whole coast, of course, those beautiful islands, as South Africans go there on holiday for tourism, there's been massive investment there as well. It's extremely worrying then to see that I think for now it's been smaller towns that came very close to attacking Pemba, but there are villages that are literally emptied out of inhabitants. And as I said, I think we underestimate the brutality of these attacks. People are being beheaded, women and girls are being kidnapped. It's not, there's been a lot of miscommunication, lack of information, and also I think the language barrier, because if you look at what is being said in the media in Portugal, for example, and television, documentaries, ever since in the last 2 years, it's amazing how I think ordinary Portuguese, for example, are much more aware of what's going on in Cabo Delgado than South Africans. It's on our doorstep. I think there's the language gap. There are many issues. There's also the fact that the Mozambican authorities have really tried to prevent any information coming out because of course, the gas investments. They don't want this to be threatened. They don't want the companies to pull out. And for now, we haven't seen any of the investments being cancelled, or any of the companies expressing doubts. Some have withdrawn personnel, but that officially has been said is because of COVID-19. So there hasn't been, from what we can see, any official sort of impact at this point on the actual investments that have been announced and that have been made.
Okay, while we're talking about companies, I asked Sasol to participate, and what they actually sent me a statement. They said Sasol is aware of reports of a series of attacks that have taken place in the northern regions of Mozambique. Sasol's operations are situated in the southern region, they say, and are operating normally. They said we are in regular contact with the relevant authorities in Mozambique and continue to monitor the situation very closely. The safety of our employees and facilities is of paramount importance, and we will take additional appropriate action should it become necessary. Just to state Sasol's position there, they've also divested from the Mozambican Pipeline Investment Company and the Central Térmica de Rosana Garcia. Well, the question that everybody is asking, and I've been sent a couple of questions all related to this, of possible South African involvement in the threat in the northern parts of Mozambique. Is there a possibility that South Africa is going to become involved?
Yes, I think the threat against South Africa came actually from the Islamic State, just when there were talks that a SADC force might be sent to help the Mozambicans. Because there's a feeling amongst civil society, many organizations saying, where is SADC, where is the region, why is nobody assisting Mozambique, which obviously their police and the military who are trying to stem this insurgency has been completely ineffective. They've hired mercenaries, Russians, and now South Africans and Zimbabweans and so on. So there was speculation that there would be South African military involvement. That still continues. So there was this threat to say, don't get involved. It's exactly what happened when Kenya, for example, got involved in Somalia to stem Al-Shabaab there. Then we saw massive attacks in Nairobi, the Westgate shopping center and many other places in Kenya. There were reprisals for this. So this is the danger. I think the misunderstanding is some people think, oh, this insurgency can spread to South Africa. This is pretty much contained in one province, in Cabo Delgado province for now, on the Tanzanian, border, that very completely northern province. So I think at this point there is no danger that the insurgency, at least in the short term, is going to spread from Cabo Delgado and spread downwards to Maputo, and then attack, South Africa in that way. But what the counterterrorism specialists are saying is that you could have the kind of so almost individual attacks, people claiming to be from the Islamic State. We've had small in 2018 there was an incident in Verulam in KwaZulu-Natal. There've been isolated incidents, very few actually verifiable. What we can verify is definitely terrorist groups are using the South African banking and logistics, and there's the UN and so on has asked South Africa to track these. But so the threat is I think there isn't really a threat that the insurgency itself, which is very localized based on local grievances in Cabo Delgado, ethnic, political, historical, etc., that is going to spread all the way down. What I think is the concern is these individual attacks. Yeah. Oops.
We've got Leigh back in. We don't see her visual, but we've got her. I'm going to just show you who Leigh Elston is. Leigh Elston, can you just please introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry that I was a bit late in joining. Mozambique still has some internet connection issues. Yeah, my name is Leigh Elston. I'm the editor at Zitamar News, which is an English language news website focusing on Mozambique, and we focus mainly on political and economic and business news. And I focus myself on energy, and particularly the big LNG investments that are happening in the country at the moment.
Well, please tell us about that, because we've started discussing it a little bit, but this is huge. I mean, it's the biggest FDI investment, in Africa at the moment.
Absolutely enormous. I mean, the Rovuma Basin gas discoveries, which were kind of the beginning of 2010, were one of the top discoveries in the world over the last 25 years. So, I mean, on any scale, it's huge. For Mozambique, it's absolutely phenomenal discovery. And then, I mean, what's also been very surprising, I think, is the pace with which they've actually developed these reserves in very challenging environment. You had, gas price crashed twice over the last 10 years. It's Cabo Delgado, which is a very undeveloped province. It's one of the poorest provinces in Mozambique, with very little infrastructure. And it's a country with, they do have gas development experience. You have the Sasol gas fields in Inhambane, as you mentioned earlier, but they haven't built anything close to infrastructure on this scale. And LNG is a very specialized type of industry. So really, it's been kind of amazing that from first discovery to FID of the first of Coral FLNG, the floating liquefaction plant that Eni made FID on in 2017, and then this year having, or last year having FID made by Anadarko, and then the financial close by Total this year has been pretty incredible. And I think that definitely the Mozambique government has to be commended for managing to get this off the ground in very, very challenging circumstances. They had their own $2 billion debt crisis. They've had the insurgency since the end of 2017, and still these projects have pushed forward. And now there's obviously, sorry, probably enough of an intro.
No, sorry, thanks, Leigh. So how big do you think the threat is of these groups? And are they linked to ISIS? Because they say they're ISIS linked. ISIS been claiming that they are linked to them? How big a threat are they?
I would say, I'd say, as Liesl mentioned as well, this is essentially a local grievances. It's a local issue. It's been a lack of, over decades, lack of development in Cabo Delgado, lack of economic opportunities for people living in the province who have seen big investments in gas, in mining, all of at which points they've assumed that there's going to be more jobs for locals, more development, and that's been very, very slow to come, and will continue to be slow because, I mean, you're not even going to see first gas exports until for another 5 years, and it's going to be another 5 years after that until you really actually see any revenues coming in, and then how much is going to trickle down to the north is a big question. So it's essentially a local grievance. There is an Islamist element to it, and actually I think that the US had a press conference a few days ago where they said, yeah, there are signs that ISIS is involved, but probably they've piggybacked onto something which was primarily a local grievance, and now they're trying to exploit that to the extent that they can, but the danger is they're going to increasingly provide resources, training, and support, certainly giving the conflict more publicity than it would have had if it had remained just a purely local conflict. But you know, lots of Mozambican researchers, lots of people who are based in the country said that, you know, you have to look at it as a local conflict primarily, with this with an Islamist kind of agenda, but sort of to the side. And in terms of threats, do you mean to kind of Cabo Delgado, Mozambique, or to the
I
to
think
South Africa? I mean,
yeah, to South Africa.
I don't think. I mean, to the extent that it's a regional issue, it is going to impact South Africa definitely. But I think, I mean, it's the neighbouring countries, and I think particularly Tanzania, that it's sort of the biggest threat to in terms of sort of regional risks. And then in terms of Sasol's investments, they're a long way south to be endangered from that threat. And I don't think, I mean, there's definitely talk of it moving south into Nampula, but not as far as in Yamba in the south of the country. There was, for example, discussions of South Africa building a pipeline or being part of a consortium or receiving gas if there was a pipeline built from the Rovuma Basin gas fields into South Africa, potentially connecting to Sasol's existing gas pipeline. I think the conflict now makes it look like that kind of investment in pipeline infrastructure looks like it could be very risky, because that's obviously something that could be attacked.
Yeah, but what I'm referring to is the fact that ISIS then said a warning to South Africa: don't get involved there, or we could maybe, you know, spill it over the borders to you. Liesl, do you think that is just, you know, we should take that seriously?
Yes, I mean, this is what terrorist groups do, and they, you know, they threaten. As I said earlier, I think their capacity to stage attacks in South Africa is we have no evidence of Islamist cells operating in South Africa. There have been evidence, as I said, that they are using logistics and the financial system and so on, and very serious, you know, indications that South African intelligence services definitely take very seriously. But as Leigh said, Cabo Delgado is very far away, so for that insurgency to literally spread to South Africa is unlikely. But, you know, with terrorism, what we've seen around the world, it's very difficult to predict and to you know, to analyze and to say what's going to happen. You had in many instances, if you look at what happened in the Sahel, France going in Mali in 2013. Then you had a series of attacks in Paris to say, in retribution of you know, your role against jihadists in the Sahel. You had sporadic attacks, you know, like in a hotel in a big city like Ouagadougou before. You know, the terror threat from the Sahel had spread from Mali to Burkina Faso. And as I said, Kenya, we even saw Uganda being attacked for having troops in Somalia. So It's not, I mean, those people who are saying that South Africa is being threatened, and that's why we shouldn't go in. South Africa is already, I could say, involved because we are a member of SADC, we are a neighboring country, and what we at the ISS and so on have been talking about these last couple of weeks was, for South Africa, for SADC to get together, take this thing seriously. All the member states of SADC, the region, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, the Angolans are already, I think, have been asked by Mozambique for help. And so that you can have a comprehensive solution to this, because no terror groups around the world have ever really been defeated militarily. At least on the African continent, we've seen they are spreading. It's other also comprehensive non-military approaches that need to be implemented in order for, this insurgency, from what we can see, can be stemmed. It's not, it's not impossible. That I'm also not saying it's going to spread throughout the whole of Mozambique and the region.
Well, I know that apparently Naledi Pandor, the Minister of International Relations, has been asked by Mozambique to help, and also as a member of SADC. So Leigh, you don't expect South African troops to suddenly show up in Maputo?
No, I don't think so. I mean, and I think sort of a lot of experts like Liesl have been saying, it's not necessarily something that can be solved militarily. And I think there is definitely a lot of support that can be provided, regionally, and sort of sharing experience. I know Mozambique up to now has been very reluctant to share intelligence on what's going on, and even sort of some kind of training or support of Mozambican troops, but that it's better really to look at the sort of the social side of the conflict, the economic side, how you can help create jobs, help improve social infrastructure, hospitals, schools, roads, all these kind of things. And I think there's a lot of sort of sharing of experience that SADC partners and the region can do to programs and assistance that can help. I mean, and also donors like the US are looking at sort of support that they could have provided, could provide following Cyclone Kenneth in the areas, that kind of support. But I don't think necessarily military involvement, South African troops on the ground, is going to do is going to be very helpful in this situation.
What do you know, Leigh, about the Dyke Group? I've been sent a question. What about it's a private security, private transport company operating there at the moment?
Yeah, yeah. So exactly. So which is I think based in South Africa, but it's a former Zimbabwean, it's a Zimbabwean guy, Lionel Dyke, that leads it. Yes, so they have been providing support to the Mozambican troops, and actually since they have been providing that support, it's been sort of helicopter mainly to help them move. So they've been firing from helicopters to support ground troop operations, also moving troops back and forth. I think now their contract has been renewed, and now some elements of that contract will also include some support on the ground. That there has definitely been since having that support, that PMC support, the Mozambique army has been more effective in being able to retake some villages that the insurgents were in. Not wholly, not every battle has been won, and it's obviously still an ongoing issue. But I think, which is the reason they renewed that contract, some of that support has been effective.
Liesl, are you aware? Is this? I mean, is this even legal in South Africa, or is it not a mercenary group?
Yes, it's a mercenary group. I mean, it's a private security company, and it is illegal in South Africa. But some people are saying that South Africans have to be aware, and somehow, tacitly welcoming this, because while there is the Dyke advisory group in Mozambique, it almost gives an excuse for South Africa to say, well, they can't send troops while there is, and illegal operation going on, if you understand what I mean. Because of course the South African military are ready, and there are lots of talks and meetings and so on, and there could be a SADC deployment, but it actually that's the last thing South Africa would really want to do because of the threats, but also, you know, the capacity of the military of the whole region. And, you know, as Leigh said, you know, what can they really achieve? The thing that we are concerned about is civilian casualties. Once you have private security companies like this, they aren't bound by mandates, UN regulations, you know, like the UN and the African Union, we have in Somalia, you have AMISOM and the Lake Chad Basin, you know, against Boko Haram, we have the NGF and so on. They all operate under very strict rules to respect human rights and civilian lives. So the reports that we have is these guys. I mean, I'm not, you know, well, you know, the people that I've been speaking about who are eyewitnesses are saying some of so it's air support at this point, right? And then they just indiscriminately are shooting at the insurgents. And of course, I mean, one person said there are hundreds of civilian casualties, well, have been over these last 2 years from this activity. Now, it's quite debatable, and the military establishment in South Africa is, you know, there's a vigorous debate around how well and how successful the dike support is. One, you know, military experts said no, but the young guys, they actually don't know how to fight an insurgency. You do need this South African military to come in. But the concern is about ordinary civilians in Cabo Delgado that have been caught up between, on the one hand, the insurgents, on the other hand, the government, security forces, and you know, they're like caught up in this war, and there'll be 250,000 of them already that had internally displaced, that had to flee there.
Okay, we've got just another 2 minutes left because we've got to be a little bit shorter today. Can we have just lastly, Leigh, now, what is the promise of this? What does it hold for the whole South African region? What benefits for the South African region?
So the benefits of
the gas project. Of the gas project, yes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, okay, definitely benefit is that Mozambique is going to be looking to export a lot of that gas, I think, through, and South Africa has its own LNG to gas program. So I know there's already companies looking at building LNG import terminals in southern Mozambique, so you can have small shipments that come down from the Rovuma Basin into southern Mozambique, then, you know, into South Africa. I know Kruger, sorry, I'm not pronouncing that right, is being mooted for an LNG import terminal. So you now got a sort of small scale LNG happening around the continent potentially, which could help with the power crisis that you're seeing. And also, I mean, like Mozambique has plans to build 2 gigawatt gas-fired power station in the south of the country using Rovuma reserves, which would then be able to ship power to other countries as well, in as part of the Southern African Power Pool. They're also still, I mean, I don't know how serious this project still is, but I've heard the South African government is still keen on it to build a pipeline from the north to the south of the country and into South Africa. So then you've got then the potential for offshoots to Zimbabwe and other countries. So you could really start industrializing, using this gas, industrializing other parts of the country and neighbors. So I mean, there's a huge amount of gas there. So there's no shortage. They could actually potentially fulfill all these options depending on what demand is and how countries move forward with their power strategies.
I've just muted myself. That's unfortunately all we have time for today. We just want to tell our BizNews community that it will be on YouTube, the video. And what can I just say thank you to Leigh Elston, who came in from Maputo. You heard her, and I had her video up just in case you want to look at her again, her power slide. And we've also got Liesl Louw-Vaudran. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.